Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the War Report, coming off of our last appearance with Geo, and very fun episode. Certainly check that one out if you haven't already. And we're with another returning guest as well. We had him on about a month ago last time. That's George McMillan. And, of course, what more can you say about him? We get into the real deep dive stuff with George here, and we have another presentation put together today, particularly on recent news, particularly with a lot of the stuff coming out of Russia, Ukraine, to a lesser extent the Middle East. So next few hours here, we can certainly cover all of that. But we just did have some brief news updates out of Ukraine first, so I'll hand it over to the GSP to get us briefed on those.
Yep. So we're in interest of giving George as much platform time as possible. We're not going to do the frontline news. I will say just very briefly that Toretsk, which is just south of Chasiv Yar, has fallen. One of the industrial plants which the Ukrainians had taken has been retaken by the Russians, and they've expanded their control of Chasiv Yar. And one of the main highways leading into Pokrovsk, there are two from the west going east into Pokrovsk. One of them, the Russians have taken over now. So this will reduce the abilities for the Ukrainians to supply Pokrovsk. And I believe there is a plant there. There is some kind of, now I don't know if it's lithium, but there are some lithium mining areas here that, if all things keep going as they have been going for several months, the Russians will take over. I don't know if there was a coke plant here that was the production or processing rather had stopped. And the other bit of news on the front is that Neskuchne, which is the southernmost village in that conglomeration of Velika Novoselovka, the Russians took that 2 days ago. They took Toretsk 2 days ago as well, or a day ago, and because I said it would fall on the weekend, it actually fell Monday morning. Anyways, but some other interesting news coming out from Ukraine regarding the issue of oil and gas. We know a few weeks ago there was I don't know if it was an oil tanker, but it was a Russian ship that was attacked. Bombs were placed in it. I don't know if it was under like a Russian command, but there were Russians on it, and 38 on board. Two drowned. They've never found them. The others were rescued by passing ships. But Engels Air Force Base. Well, there's a oil plant close by, and this is in Saratov, Russia. Kind of sort of southern Russia, west of the Urals. Let's say it's south of Kazan, basically south of Moscow, but north of Rostov-on-Don. Anyhow, there was an attack last week. 6 drones were used by the Ukrainians. They were shot down. One of them, or parts of one of them, collided into this oil refinery and caused a fire. However, today it seems that there was a far more successful attack by the Ukrainians, again using drones, again on the same oil facility. And then really the big news is Turkstream. So the Ukrainians had tried to attack Turkstream last week, but they attacked it again today. I don't know how successful it was. You can see now that the Ukrainians have become kind of like a mercenary army for the Americans, much like, let's say, Al-Qaeda or the Kurds. These are people that will never let go, or the Albanians for that matter. These are people who will never abandon the empire. Their entire existence will always depend on their ability to serve certain geopolitical American interests. But I think one of the things, in light of the collapse of Assad's Syria, is where will that put Turkey now that Ukraine definitely has eyes on destroying the Turk Stream pipeline? Now, I can see why, for instance, the Americans and the British would want, maybe for different reasons, the British would want it because it would give them one over the Russians. But the Americans would want it because the Americans, I think, are set on Russia never supplying gas and oil to Europe, even if it has to go through Turkey. So I wonder what this will do for both European politics, American-Turkish relations, but also American-Turkish relations in Syria. And I give it to you, gentlemen, to expand on.
Oh, I was watching. What is it? I forget what channel I was watching today, but there's a woman that had a very, very good show on that. Yeah, the purpose of cutting off Turk Stream is to prevent the gas from going into the lower Danube River Valley. They're trying to cut off Orban and Fico.
Yes,
but also Vučić in Serbia.
Yep.
Yeah, they're trying to cut them off. So, because what we're getting into, because that's a good segue. Let me just start going through the slide set here. Let me do the screen share.
And I will say on that note that it was about a week after the Nord Stream pipeline attack that you had an attempted sabotage on Turk Stream. So this has been something that's been a long time in the making. We've seen the hints of this, and it's really no surprise the direction it's going to go. I know that you had brought up that the Ukrainians at this point are going to put themselves in a similar situation as, say, the Albanians or a number of these Islamic militant groups that are in league with the U.S. foreign policy. But we did talk about that, actually, towards the beginning of the war, a little bit before the war, that if not outright war, the American empire, the foreign policy establishment would be satisfied with a slow, small-burning, low-intensity conflict perpetually on Russia's border. And that is, I think, especially now that it looks like the conventional war is lost, is what they're going to try to settle for going forward with that region. If they can just keep some sort of low-level insurgency, some sort of low-level discontent that can really fracture that area between Russia and Europe, that can turn it into pretty much a no man's land, then it isn't what they would have wanted as their first option, but it's something that they can certainly walk away with and realize that they have that one stopgap over Russia. If you had any thoughts on the issue with Turk Stream and the current news in Ukraine, floor is yours.
Yeah, let's just go down the list, because the big deal here is that, okay, when I was on with Felix and Michael last time, Michael was like, oh, yeah, the fall of Assad was a really big win for Turkey and Israel. Okay, it was. But I had a lot of misgivings about it because there's so many different issues. But, yeah, it was at the end of that video. It was already 2 hours long. And not time to bring up the other issues. But, the following days, I was on with Stuart Turley, so I picked up where that left off and kept on going. Mm-hmm. Because with the gas contracts ending on the 31st going through Ukraine, it means that all the oil and natural gas now goes through Turkey. Right. And Erdogan did not want Turk Stream blown up. He was very adamant that would not be allowed to happen. And so since then, it has happened. Now, this video was titled, Kellogg's plan for 2025, because Lavrov had that statement on the 26th that he was not interested in talking to the Trump administration before the inauguration about a truce. A truce is a road to nowhere. So he threw cold water on that on his December 26th interview.
Right.
And still in the U.S. media, even on Fox News and Newsmax, during the whole election cycle, they're like, yes, Trump is going to deal with Putin from a position of strength. And peace through strength, and they just keep on repeating this. And Mark Levin on Fox News is like, oh, all these Putin supporters, they just kiss his ass, and he hates Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis and Doug McGregor. And okay, I think I made enough of a point there. And Hannity, the same thing. It's just nonstop with all these people. And it was really started to, hit me that these people really think the Russian economy is about to collapse and Ukraine is winning the war. They really do think that. So I was like, okay, the Kellogg talks are going to go nowhere because, yes, Doug McGregor the other day was saying, yeah, it's 7-to-1 ratio, KAA, WIA ratio in favor of Russia, not Ukraine. So, and then instead of Putin, attacking Ukraine for no reason, oh no, it's the U.S. and NATO put their offensive equipment right next to their only warm water port in Rostov-on-Don, right within 50 miles of their only warm water port for the Black Sea fleet of Rostov-on-Don, and then right next to all those different pipeline terminals. So yes, right. They just put U.S. NATO weaponry, offensive weaponry, right next to the border. So yes, that was met with a military response.
And not only that, that was after almost 10 years of trying to resolve it diplomatically with both Ukraine and the West between the two Minsk agreements.
Right. And then you go back to Putin complaining about that in the first place. So, closer to 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. It's even worse than you said. Yeah. So it's just mind boggling how people don't know anything about this region. So you got MSNBC and CNN that are just total neocon, neoliberal, far left Greens. And within that coalition, you got the way I explain it is you got the neoconservatives that want, to be the world's only superpower. So now they got to sabotage everybody else.
Yes.
You got the Greens that want to go climate change, get rid of fossil fuels. Well, and then you got the neoliberals in between on the right-left continuum, and they want more of everything, which is like, okay, you want more of everything, you're in the race to bankruptcy. Okay, and then the problem with the neocons is, okay, they are pretty much, pro-fossil fuel, but you cannot run a modern economy, let alone a modern military during a time of war, during a time of conflict, on renewables. That is so totally insane.
Yes.
But yet the German people, the German stoplight coalition voted for that. So it's obvious that there's got to be some party that's going to emerge after that, and it's the AFD, that are going to be like, look, this just totally isn't working. Go to natural gas. It's the cleanest burning fuel from the environment. That's the obvious choice, to have both a good economy and be clean. Use renewables when we can. All right. It's gloomy over in Germany during the winter. That's not going to work anyway. So they just went through a coalition, something that's not going to work. And what I've been explaining on Energy Newsbeat is, the Cold War era was all about the maritime powers controlling the maritime choke points. The GWAT was just an excuse to take over the riverine and the terrestrial land choke points as well. Of course, the end game is to control the petroleum fields and the natural gas fields, along with the land bridge pipeline transportation routes. Because if you're going to cut off Western Europe from Russian natural gas, under the 5 power center doctrine strategy, then you got to replace it. So they moved NATO east, following Kennan's 5 power center strategy, which is, the basis of Brzezinski's, chessboard, grand chessboard, and the Wolfowitz plan. So they're going to move NATO east to put up tariff and non-tariff trade barriers to block Russian natural gas so Germany doesn't integrate with Russia. Well, okay, so now they've cut off Russian natural gas and they haven't replaced it. So yes, a party has risen to get rid of the stoplight party, and that's the AfD. Well, all Putin has to do now is nothing. He doesn't have to talk to the Trump administration at all. He just has to let the AfD take power, but it's not just them. I mean, you got Nigel Farage in the UK. You got Marine Le Pen populist movement in France. But the AfD is rising, so they can. It's going to be difficult to freeze them out of future coalitions. You got the Freedom Party in Austria about the same position. Orban and Fico in Hungary and Slovakia, and you already got Vučić in power in Serbia. Bulgaria would like to, the elections there are very heavily influenced, with the United States backing the puppet, the people that are in power by outspending their political opponents. These things are like 20 or 30 to 1. It's obscene. And they did that in Georgia. The Dream Party won anyway. Because the more that the housing prices rise, more the energy prices rise, the businesses collapse, job loss, the standard of living collapses. Yes, an alternative party is gonna rise. So that's occurring. So all Putin has to do is absolutely nothing. And one of the parts I want to get to on the second part of this slide set, if you go to the second, the second screen here. No, I'm sorry, you had it right the first time. The big points is Russia cut off all Russian natural gas feeds to Europe. On the 31st, the last contract ended. Yes, all the energy prices soared. The automobile industry is collapsing, not just in Germany, but with Stellantis and Italy and France, and also in the Spanish auto industry cannot compete. Well, once the prices rise in one area, since the grids are connected, then the prices rise in all areas. So Obviously they didn't think that through. So then now all of a sudden Putin has to do, it has to do nothing but sit back and watch. So go down to the next one. Yeah, so just the 9 points is, the Syria event was prearranged. The natural gas contracts were going to end on the 31st. Yeah, now instead of having Russia and Turkey sending natural gas to Europe, they went from a duopoly to a monopoly with Erdogan. All Erdogan have to do is control the gas flow west, and they can actually contribute to the demise of the EU and NATO. So again, our government really didn't think that thing through. Yeah, German industry is collapsing. All the industry in Europe is collapsing because of this. Yeah, the populists, some of them want to work with NATO and the EU as of last month. But since Trump, and so glad Trump got elected over the alternative, don't get me wrong, big supporter of the president. He just needs to make an adjustment on his foreign policy here. He's finding out the hard way. But the AfD went from working with EU and NATO. Now Alice Weidel is talking about, well, we just got to get rid of the EU and NATO, because Trump has been saying that he's going to put these, if they rebuild Nord Stream, they're just going to put the huge tariffs. So Alice Weidel, AfD, with Alice Weidel, they finally just figured out, well, if we're going to lose our car industry, if we don't take Russian natural gas, their automobile industry completely collapses. So they don't have to worry about the United States tariffs. They might as well get the Russian gas and at least be able to sell cars there, because at least they're in business. The way, the U.S. proposition is they're totally out of business. So, he's pushing them to Russia instead of away from Russia. So I already mentioned the Fox News hosts have been bragging incessantly from Trump is going to deal with Putin from a position of strength. Oh, the other thing is Trump and his cabinet level, they're trained at the tactical and operational levels, and none of them are trained at the grand strategic level. That's obvious. They'll get mad at me for saying that, but by looking at their actions, that's obvious. Go down to the next one. Slide 3. All right, yeah, so I already went over this of the populist parties are in power all the way. I just say it in these terms. It's from Germany, Austria, Liechtenstein, and then down to the Slavic world countries. So I just call that the whole Danube River Valley. Okay, Czech is not on the Danube River Valley anymore, but when it was Czechoslovakia, then it was.
Right.
So yeah, go down to the next one. So that's slide 5. Okay. So if I already went over this. If the AfD wants to rebuild the Bundeswehr, and they were debating on whether to work with U.S. and NATO or kick them out, and then they would also like to stop paying $70 billion to the EU. They put that money in only to have their economy destroyed. So, yeah, they're at the basis. They're at the point now where the AfD wants to just leave the EU and NATO altogether. So with this as a backdrop, sending Kellogg to Europe, they should have known that this was just a complete non-starter. And it was. Because
now, George, do you think they're buying time? Like, because one theory is if we keep the war going on as long as possible, that the Russian economy will eventually start to degrade. Now, some of the guys in the two guys, Russians with attitude, one of them said that in 2024 he saw the effects of inflation for the first time. I'm not saying that means like the Russian economy is in tatters, it's all over. I'm trying to sort of flesh out what is in their heads and what their strategy is. Like, perhaps they're receiving a little bit of data that seems to confirm what they're hoping would happen.
Yeah, I did Russia's hypothetical strategic. I'm glad you asked this question, by the way, because it gives me an opportunity to talk about that. Yep. I did the Russian hypothetical strategic plan on Working Brother in December of 2022, going into January of 2023.
Yeah.
So it's there in detail. I need to really probably update and do that again. But I mean, it's a predictive analysis. The way I build those strategic models is in economic development theory. You're just looking at where resources are. Okay, let me go to the three parts of an economic cycle. You're taking minerals or energy out of the ground. You have to turn it into a consumer product and then distribute it. And then then the producers are also consumers, and the cycle goes right around with the right amount of liquidity in it. Well, when you start to build your economic models, it's just, well, where are the resources? How do you send them to a factory for processing, or factories? Because this is usually multiple stages, right?
Yep.
And then how do you distribute everything? So if you have a complete free trade, open borders situation, for commerce, that is, in a perfect world, you're just looking at a map of what needs to go where and how to get it there and how to do it most efficiently, geographically most efficiently. One of the examples is, in the United States, you have the iron ore in Michigan and Minnesota, Wisconsin, and you send it on the Great Lakes to Pennsylvania and Ohio, where they have the most coal, because it takes twice as much coal as iron ore to make steel. So that's how you come up with these geographical efficiencies, just to give people an example.
Right.
So so that's in a perfect world. So once you have a perfect world scenario, then you got to get into reality. What's reality? You have regional and superpower rivalries. So then you have geopolitical rivalries, who then start to figure out how to block and thwart each one of those steps of the rivals. and how
Right.
to keep their allies as vassal states, not equals. So when I start to build out those models, that's how I come by my conclusions. Well, in this case, since the U.S. implanted oligarchs are not exporting the profits to London and Wall Street, it's staying inside Russia, and they've been selling. I need to go back and look at the figures lately, but they've been selling less energy, but making higher profits from the higher prices.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay, is that still true? I haven't really actually looked at it in a couple of months, but
Yes, it is. It is still true. Like, they haven't been able to contain Russia with like minimal amount of oil prices, like, because Russia is skewing these issues, by working closely with, first of all, with China and India, and China and India will pay whatever. And of course, India is now the largest resupplier of Russian oil because they can, and gas. In fact, like, gas in 2024, Russian gas, in all its forms. So some that was coming in through Russia proper, some that was coming in through various boats that the West likes to call ghost boats, or through the Indians and even the Greeks. It exceeded that of the U.S. So, like, it's. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's very hard to, like, looking at the geography of Europe. Like, you have Europe and you have Russia, and Russia has all these resources. It makes infinitely more sense to have Russia supply Europe than America.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the problem, because, going back to the five power center doctrine, Russia's going to integrate with Germany, the whole German world, and then the whole Slavic world would follow. So, yes, the big fear of the United States is, Russia leaves the alliance, but they stop using the petrodollar. They start paying in euros and rubles, and then the whole petrodollar crashes. But then Russia's also trying to build the international north-south trade corridor and deal with India directly. And just recently, somebody sent me the news that the TAPI pipeline has started in Afghanistan now.
So really?
Yeah.
Yes, the Taliban gave clearance for that, I think, last week.
Oh, wow. I didn't know.
Yeah. So that's going through. And so I don't want to get into Afghanistan politics, but, I will later. Because the U.S. sends the pallets of cash, and we went back to Operation Cyclone to fund these violent extremist organizations to actually blow up all Russian and Chinese infrastructure.
Yeah.
So if Russia integrates with Western Europe, it's a Haushofer integration. Eventually, they leave the petrodollar, pay in rubles, and leave the whole Western alliance. Well, then, same thing with India. If that pipeline goes through, then Russia's infrastructurally integrated with India, and using the instruments of national power, the DIME mnemonic acronym, it's diplomatic, infrastructural, informational, military, economic integration. But the way it works is, in reality, you get the infrastructural integration first. In this case, it's going to be energy transfers by pipeline, which is the far cheapest form of energy. Nothing else can compete with natural gas via pipeline.
Yeah.
LNG is a sea power coping strategy. It is not a long-term solution. It is just a short-term fix, and it's not even a fix.
Yeah.
So if you integrate infrastructurally, then you're going to integrate economically, then you integrate diplomatically, then you integrate militarily. So you end up leaving the alliance systems. So then if Russia's connected to Western Europe by pipeline and they integrate, and they're connected to Iran, so then Russia has a warm water port, and they're connected to India, then they're connected to to the subcontinent. They've had Power Up Siberia 1 functional for years now, and they're just adding pipelines to that and building that.
Power of Siberia is supposed to go online very soon.
Oh, it's been up.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been
Power of
up
Siberia
for a while.
2.
Yeah.
2. Okay, yeah, right. Okay. They went ahead and connected the link to the Kazakhstan gas fields to make it go faster. So,
Oh, really? Interesting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the debate was Putin. Well, Russia and Kazakhstan ultimately are competitors in that space.
Yeah.
So he really wanted to send it through Ulaanbaatar and through Mongolia, the pipeline to China. And now that's, it is. China didn't want it because he thought the U.S. had too much leverage in Mongolia.
Yeah.
Not sure if that's true, because if the Russians sent the pipeline through Ulaanbaatar, and all of a sudden that would dramatically increase their living standards, well, then Russia would be integrated with Mongolia, and they would have more. If they have more economic sway, then they would have more political sway too, right? I mean,
and I would say a few years back, Mongolia was much more integrated with the U.S., but especially since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, Mongolia, finding itself in between China and Russia, has played its cards rather pragmatically and has grown closer to both.
Right. Okay. Then China also has a problem with, Mongolia and Inner Mongolia, so you got some politics that I'm not too sure about. I know it exists, but I don't know how big of a deal it is, or it's not.
But I did want to return to the point about India and the trade corridors, and I did see a little bit in the PowerPoint I was looking over before the show that we might get into a little bit later, but it really does take us back to the Great Game, having that Russian route through Afghanistan into India, which ultimately takes them to the subcontinent, out once again in the Black Sea, and then you also consider the ports in Iran that would be carrying Russian goods, which goes back to the British containment strategy of the 19th century.
Yeah, I think I got the Great Game books later on in this slide set. I got too many slide sets. I get confused which one I got up there. But
just tell me which ones to skip over, which ones to be on. Like I said, just let me know.
Yeah, anyway, my 6 power center theory that I did on Working Brother and with Felix Rex is, if Russia, if they're already integrated with China, and they integrate with Germany, and they finish the INSTC and the TAPI pipeline, they integrate with India, then if they build the Vladivostok pipeline to South Korea through North Korea, and I always talk about the Sakhalin to Hokkaido pipeline, then Russia's connected to all the major power centers, and then the United States, its complete global alliance system just collapses. So now that's on the brink of occurring in Western Europe, because you got the German automobile industry is about to collapse, as along with the other ones, and the Japanese automobile industry is declining rapidly also. You got the Honda bought or bailed out Nissan and Mitsubishi. Of course, if they bought them, bailed them out, they're obviously, that's also a precursor to, drastically cutting jobs and cutting factories there also.
Right.
Because obviously they're not going to need that capacity. So there's going to be a lot of job loss, streamline cuts there. So it looks like the United States, well, if that happens, then the United States first island chain strategy, is ended too. But now to make that happen, all Putin has to do is nothing, which is when I'm to get into where we left off on the Felix Rex video, because Michael, really thought it was a big win for for Israel and Turkey, and a big blow, a big blow against Putin. And I was like, no, Putin just took a $50 billion a year liability that he was paying to support Assad. He saves $50 billion a year by just moving Assad to Moscow. He's transferred that liability onto the United States. Okay, so they get rid of the Shia Alawites and the Hezbollah threat in the Golan, but now HTS Al-Qaeda is there. Isn't that a bigger threat? So that doesn't make sense. Then, because the defeat of the Syrian army went so fast that had a lot of people shaking their heads. Well, a couple of days after that video with Felix and Michael, you started seeing the Russian troops leaving their bases in Syria, and they did a peaceful transition over to the Turkish military, and then HTS, they got to peacefully pack up and then convoy out to Latakia and Tartus. As soon as I saw those videos, I was like, okay, that whole Syrian debacle was already prearranged. Assad's family was already in Moscow. Erdogan knew that a lot of the Syrian military was moved south because a lot of videos, people brought that up. I was like, okay, as soon as I saw the videos of the Russians packing up and leaving peacefully, okay, I've handed several bases over to the Iraqis, and then the not so peaceful handing over of the fall of Kabul. I was there for that too. Mm-hmm. So I've kind of been through this before, like several times.
You're right.
In different, in different capacities or in different different situations, but I've been through it. So as soon as I saw those videos, I was like, okay, this whole thing was prearranged.
Really?
And I don't see any other people really talking about that. So then you have to ask yourself, well, why is this thing prearranged? Well, yes, Putin does not need those bases in Latakia or Tartus if they're not doing commerce with Syria. People are like, oh, they're losing the bases. Well, if you don't do any commerce there, you didn't lose anything. Your military and police is what a country uses as their armed guards. Well, if they're not doing business there, they don't need the armed guards there. You only have your armed guards, for a business that's in business. If you're out of business, you don't need security there anymore. So, I mean, it really is that simple, and people don't really think this thing through. Also, the next big hit was going to be on Iran. And what I've been talking about what I went on immediately after the Felix Rex videos, when I went back on with Stu Turley, was are the strikes in Iran going to be very limited nuclear strikes, or are they going to be widespread battlefield shaping operations in Iran? Because if the pallets of cash going to the Taliban, if that is to support the violent extremist groups to wreak havoc in Xinjiang province with ETIM, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, I think they just call it the Turkestan Islamic Protectorate or something like that. It used to always be ETIM when I worked over there. And then you have the Uzbekistan Islamic Movement in the Fergana Valley, where all the oil is, by the way. You have the Sunni Tajik Taliban, which is supposed to destabilize the oil fields up on the Amudarya. You also have, you got the Uzbekistan Islamic Movement also. So, and then you got the Baluch. It used to be the Baluch Liberation Front in the 60s and 70s, and it became the Baluch Liberation Army. Well, then during Global War on Terror, they switched to an Islamic name, so it's Jaish al-Idol now. They got a lot of our gun trucks that the Taliban gave to them because the Baluch and the Taliban always got along well, and Afghanistan used to go all the way to the Persian Gulf.
That's right.
Okay, the Indian Ocean. So those fights over the water rights in the Zinjan area of Iran and Sistan, Baluchistan, yeah, that had more to do with the Taliban transferring, the gun trucks that the United States left behind to the Baluch, and that was Caspian reported on that.
Mm-hmm.
He did a good job on that. I like that. Some of his videos are a little bit too Mockingbird, but this one wasn't that Mockingbird.
I like that.
Oh, well, he used to do good videos, and then after the Ukraine war, all of a sudden, him and his buddy, I don't know the other guy's name that does that his partner was, they're out of Baku. All of a sudden, they have a staff of writers that are contributing.
Yes.
Stuff.
It was like the YouTube channel Kings and Generals, which I used to watch quite often.
Correct.
As soon as the war started, oh my God, it's like the Pentagon called them up. It's like the State Department said, "Do you want to work with us?" It was just so one-sided. I don't know.
Yeah, just go back through our archives, and you'll find we did not spare these people when they had their bad takes. I know Caspian report that we were particularly harsh on for quite a while there. They were one of our favorite whipping boys, but that's aside the point.
I remember telling Caspian report like back in 2019 that he was a NATO stooge.
Oh yeah.
And like there were people like going, "What?" It's like, I go, can you not hear how much he hates Russia in his tone? Can you not discern it? Like, come on, man.
Oh, right. He did. Well, I don't want to change the subject too much. I used to like some of his videos, but also he was talking about the first four caliphs. Watch his videos on the golden age of Islam. Oh my God. He
Yeah, I don't want to take away from him. Like his videos are very good. The production is really good. They're really well directed as well. Like the direction, the pace is very good. I mean, I'm still sub to him, so take what I say with a grain of salt.
Yeah, we're just noticing because like what the deep state does, and Brian Berletic talks about this all the time.
Yeah,
they take the the big finance, MIC, big oil industry funded think tanks, and then they use those writers to support these shows. That's what they do. Because those writers, those researchers are already being paid for in Washington.
Interesting.
They're already being paid for. Yeah, I did that in the 7P plan. Well, one of these days we'll go over my 7P plan papers anyway, I don't want to get too much into that. Oh, yeah, that's absolutely what they do. So that's where these writers come from because they're already on the payroll. They just then have to shift them over to support these Mockingbird channels. So they find a show that they kind of like that does the good video editing skills, then they give them the content. Because me and Jonathan, with the old Matt Bracken videos, we're like, if we had to pay $8,000 a month for a video tech, and we just started figuring out the figures, well, if we pay each one of us, say, $7 or $8 grand a month, that's, for the three of us, that's $24 a month. Well, we're not making, because I had to end that project because it was only, after 2 months, we only had $350 in the Patreon. And people were like, how come you ended that? And I was like, there's no money. I'm going back to work. I'm on my vacation. I'm spending my vacation doing these videos, and people are complaining. They put in a grand total, and thank for the people that did contribute. It's not on them. But you had people that didn't contribute were complaining.
Right.
Well, you didn't, and crazy. I just put in the comment section, you guys didn't contribute. I'm going back on vacation. I'm getting the stuff done I want to get done. Because when I go back to work, I want to make sure everything's time and date stamped while I'm not at work so that I don't get conflict of interest problems. We talked about that off air. So, yeah, I just wanted to get my conflict of interest problems solved. And no, I don't have time to do shows for free. At least I want to get my objective done.
Yeah.
But we started to really think, that you can tell these Mockingbird shows because Task and Purpose, he used to do his own videos by himself. the retired Army sergeant, he must have been like an E6. He's not that old. All of a sudden he started getting video tech funded and content production added on.
Right.
So, so he's paid, plus he's getting, he's getting $10,000 a month easily in content production value added, plus another $8,000 a month in video tech assistance.
Mm-hmm.
So he's getting, close to $20,000 a month in support, in either in kind or in cash, or maybe more. So then you start to figure how many of these shows went from one or two people collaboration to all of a sudden there are these big productions. Well, what does that cost? Now you're talking about $20,000 or $30,000 a month. Who's paying that? Okay, I already know who's paying that because I worked in Washington for years.
Yes.
So it's Brian Berletic talks about National Endowment for Democracy and the MacArthur Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Carnegie Foundation, and all these different foundations. Well, they already have staff writers, and they're already paid by big finance, big oil, big tech, MIC. So they're just getting their existing staff and they're just picking a YouTube video show or two or three and just applying the content. It's real easy. So that's how these shows doing that. Anyway, I don't want to get too much on that topic, just to tell your audience how this works. From working in Washington, we got off track here, but people still need to know how this works.
Now, George, I wanted to ask you this, because one of the things that Constantine and I have been playing around with, right? You were hypothesizing even before, like at least 2 years before the beginning of the SMO, about where things were headed.
Yeah.
And the SMO kind of accelerated all of that. And
let's finish the other two things we got going though.
We brought up the issue of Constantine has been really good at picking this up with Trump's statements that he wants to buy or incorporate Greenland, control the Panama, Canada, and that this is a Fortress America strategy that, in other words, it's more of a contraction.
Strategy, yes.
It's more of a contraction than an expansion, and that might seem counterintuitive. But when you see what Europe has been reduced to, right, and that it cannot afford American LNG. Inevitably, Europe is going to Europe is kind of it will be forced, in my opinion, to go to war with Russia in order to attain resources, because that will be the only way that it can survive as a continent.
Oh yeah, no.
I mean, I don't know if I'm not saying that's going to happen.
Let me hit these things in order, because we got the inflation in Russia. I want to hit that because it's very, very, very important.
Yep.
The reason why I was talking about how I set up my models of what you do in a perfect world, then you have the geopolitical rivalries, which is negative sum sabotage, because economic theory. If you're doing perfect world, everything needs to move where there's no friction, everybody gets along. That's a cooperative game scenario in game theory.
Right.
The geostrategic rivalries are zero sum game and negative sum sabotage behaviors. So that's how I build my models, and then the military part is or the unrestricted warfare part is your targeting packages to what you're actually going to sabotage. All right. That being said, Russia, now since they stopped their outflow of capital, it's an inflow of capital, and you've stopped a lot of Western goods coming in. Now they've got to resupply it. So you don't have a cost push inflation, and you don't have a monetary inflation in Russia like you do in the West. They have a demand pull inflation. So your inflation is different.
Oh,
because now you have
interesting.
more cash coming in. So in that case, in that sense, it is a monetary. But then they're trying to rebuild their businesses, but you have bottlenecks within their sectoral development strategies.
Right.
So now they have resources, and going back to the old structural, functional, and dependency school theorists, once you start moving the factories you want to move the factories to where the natural resources are, because then you're putting the jobs in your country. So to do that, for each sector, you want to vertically integrate it towards full consumer products. The more you can move it to actually making more consumer products, you're building your economy out horizontally, and you're also moving it up vertically. So they're doing a massive horizontal and vertical development strategy. And you can look at, I got, Rostow's book in the stages of economic growth. When was this produced? Like in the late 50s, early 60s, when these editions came out. Later on, you start to have full-blown, very complex solo swan models. And you also had Baumol talking, particularly the guy from Princeton, talking about, sectoral development. So they started building these economic growth theories out, ever since the 1960s. They're very well developed now. So they know what sectors that they need to develop in. Mm-hmm. Well, with the other economies collapsing, that is not the big problem that a lot of these anti-Russian people say. They can now go buy these businesses that are going out of business in Germany and Japan. They can buy them for cheap. So it's not, in that sense, it doesn't take that long to literally get the machine tools and ship them to ship them from Germany to Russia. Because right. we were on the old Telegram channel. We're like, if you can't ship the Russian natural gas to the industries, you move the factories closer to where the natural gas is.
That's right.
So I wanted to clear that up.
Interesting.
And in Iran, if Israel attacks Iran, I want to clear that up. Issue is because on the Duran, Alex and Alexander were talking about Jake Sullivan did go and talk to Trump about, I'll just say the word permission. It's not really permission, but about attacking Iran. Now, if they were just going to do a surgical strike on those nuclear facilities, Netanyahu could do that unilaterally. So why was Netanyahu and Jake Sullivan talking to Trump about that? Because it probably wasn't going to be a surgical strike. You would need permission if it was going to be a battlefield operation, shaping operation, that would then carry over to the Trump administration. That's why you would need to confer with Trump on that. Especially if you're Netanyahu, because if Trump gets mad, cuts off the arms to Israel, well, then they'd be in a bad spot. So that indicates it's not just a strike in Iran; it's to get the Baluch down south to have an uprising, and the Azeris and the Kurds up north.
Very interesting.
To start an uprising.
So what do you think of Trump's, like, recently? There's all this talk about that a peace deal could be reached over Gaza. Trump showing Jeffrey Sachs's video in which Sachs insults Netanyahu as a son of a bitch, and also that every single useless war that America has been in the Middle East has been directly because of Netanyahu in Israel. Like, I know Trump said, if those hostages aren't released, I'm going to bomb the crap out of, as if Gaza isn't already bombed the crap out of. But
yeah.
then he plays this video. So he's doing this back and forth where he's trying to pressure these two sides to come to an agreement. And it looks like they're I mean, I could be totally wrong. Okay. But I'm just saying at the moment, it doesn't look like Trump is saying, we're going to fight Iran. I could be totally wrong.
Oh no,
in a few months.
No, he doesn't want to fight Iran because
right.
The air
I wanted to hear what do you have to say about that? What's your take?
It didn't happen, but that means it wasn't going to be just a surgical strike.
Right.
Israel was planning a large scale strikes, which would have been battlefield shaping operation.
Yes.
Why would you do that? It would be because you're trying to get the Baluch, the Azeris, and the Kurds to have an uprising. The evidence of that is all of our gun trucks that we left behind in Afghanistan ending up in Baluchistan. The pallets full of cash going into Kabul when we exited Afghanistan. A lot of people don't know about that. I knew about it earlier because
this makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah. When you look at the Sean Ryan show, that's what we've been talking about on
Yes.
Energy Newsbeat. And I also want to explain this, but I want to go back to what Constantine was saying about Europe and Russia getting tension, because I want to make sure I just address these 2 points in order. So I answer the questions. There's a high correlation of the cash and of the chaotic departure from Afghanistan, the cash going to the different foreign fighters in Afghanistan, and then the violent extremist organizations blowing up Russian and Chinese infrastructure all over the place.
Right.
Okay. It's almost as if there are certain clandestine entities behind this. All right. I can't. I'm already getting my videos yanked off of YouTube as it is. I want people to use their imagination a little bit, because you have regular warfare and you have irregular warfare. You have overt operations and covert operations.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to let people to figure out what those correlations are, because you have the Baluch that have our gun trucks down south that the IRGC has not captured or destroyed, because they obviously want to leave their people up north. You had that airstrike on Iran's natural gas pipelines that feed their electrical grid, so their electrical grid is severely degraded during winter. And then you have the MEK that were put back in Iraq rather, and one has to ask, is that to foment a Kurdish revolution inside Iran? And also,
the
Israelis are trying to get the Azeris in Tabriz area to foment a revolution. So from those ideas, that would be consistent with a wider airstrike in Iran to get those groups to overthrow. In that case, yes, it appears like...
kind of like Libya, right? All these forces...
Libya's all over again, yeah. I got to be careful how I say this, though.
Right, but essentially...
Yeah.
The U.S., Israel, and others would perform the role of an air force for these insurgencies.
Right. For the groups that are already been organized, trained, and armed. Okay?
Right.
Because the arming and the training has to happen before.
Right.
Okay? So
yes,
the very fact that they would be asking Trump, who's not in office, for what he thinks of it, means it was probably a wider battle shaping operation was planned. And if that were to occur, what I was telling the people at Energy Newsbeat, well, you guys have been on my Telegram channel for a while, back when I had it. Watch the Indian news, watch First Post, watch WION, watch some of those Indian, because the Indian channels would report that, and CNN's not going to. Fox News isn't going to.
Right.
But the Indians will be all over it.
Yes.
All right. I want to hit the role of trading blocks is very key here, because he was talking about, Constantine was talking about, will Europe go to war with Russia? Oh no, you get rid of the EU, you have free trade.
Yeah.
You have Constantine's peace triangle. Yeah, so the purpose of me moving the EU east, okay, let me back up a second. Articles of Confederation of the United States was chaotic. You had interstate trade barriers. So the Articles of Confederation disappeared. The U.S. Constitution was adopted. And then that made free trade within the United States the standard. So Wall Street actually grew and could actually do business with all 50 states. So after World War II, Wall Street, City of London, needed to replicate that in Europe. So they took the European Coal and Steel Union, they turned it into the European Economic Community, and then the European Economic Union, the EU.
Right.
But the reason why you do that is so Wall Street and the City of London has one entity that controls the growing trading bloc. So they replicated the United States and Europe. And the purpose of that is so the multinational corporations can control that area. Then they moved to EU East. So then you're trying to control that area by keeping Russian goods out.
Right.
Well, the problem with that is without Russian natural gas, the whole thing is going to collapse. So you're not, the EU and the populist parties want to buy Russian natural gas again, which means they're kicking the EU out and NATO because they're all talking about forming, so that just means a new trading bloc is going to occur. And like what I've been talking about, if they did not sabotage Nord Stream, if Germany is getting, they were going to get what, 110 billion cubic feet per year? I think that's what that was. Or was it 150? I forget what the numbers were. I think it's 110 billion cubic feet.
110, right.
Yeah, 110 per annum. Okay. I said because that's enough not only to feed Germany, but that's enough to feed Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Austria. It's also enough to feed Czech and Slovakia, Hungary, and Serbia. Well, then you're going to have the whole Danube River Valley feeding off of that. So it wouldn't just be Germany leaving the petrodollar. It would have been all those countries exiting the petrodollar and integrating with Russia.
Which in turn give Germany more influence over Europe versus its current position with the United States, where it's more beholden. And also, while the situation with Turkey is quite up in the air at the moment, at least at the time, say when Nord Stream was going through, Turkey was a much more steadfast U.S. ally. It takes the Turks, it removes them from the equation in many ways.
Yes, in many ways, but not all the way. So, So then the United States, had the, they had the Euromaidan revolution. They took advantage of the Minsk Accords, and they kept on moving more military assets towards Rostov-on-Don, the Azov Sea area where the ports are. And then, yes, Russia finally, came back with a military response to a military action. Because, yes, that's a military action. So now the neocons up their game. But by upping their game, they up the risk. Because now they have, we were talking about narcissistic personality disorder. They have a way of making their worst fear happen, of self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep.
Well, now, instead of having the European Union work with Russia, they've been totally 100% against it. Well, Putin, Trump cannot deal with a position of strength because Putin doesn't do any business with Western Europe anymore. So who cares? Or actually any part of Europe. So he doesn't have to meet with Trump at all. So Trump isn't meeting from a position of strength. And now instead of the AfD and the populist group saying, okay, we'll work with the EU and we'll work with NATO, they're at the point now where they're like, just get rid of the EU and NATO. So comparing the neocons to narcissistic personality disorder, they're about to create their worst fear, because all those people, all the whole Danube River Valley, well, if they do that, then they're creating their own trade bloc. And it's going to be a pro-Russian trade bloc if you're getting Russian natural gas. Well, what's that going to do? That's going to leave the Baltics, Poland, and Ukraine isolated.
Yeah.
And then, you got Bulgaria would love to go back to Russian natural gas, and the Ukrainian. Well, we're assuming that it's the Ukrainians that tried to blow up Turk Stream. What are they trying to do? They're trying to make sure that these other countries cannot easily go back to Russian natural gas. It's Nord Stream all over again. And remember, South Stream was diplomatically stopped from 2011 to 2014. So they're either diplomatically stopped the pipelines, or they're just outright sabotaged. One of the 4-star generals called Michael Yan, who then called me to ask why the Lithuanian pipeline blew up that was December 2022. And I said, it doesn't matter where the pipelines blow up. They want to stop Russian natural gas from going to the end user, and the end user eventually leaving the petrodollar and paying in rubles, and then leaving the EU and NATO to join a Russian trading bloc. It's always those three things. It doesn't matter where the pipelines blow up. The motive for doing so is the same.
Right.
It doesn't matter what covert activities. There's still covert activities with the same motive and the same objective. Well, now with the collapse of both European industry and the Japanese industry, they're creating this scenario where these people are going to run to Soviet Union and drop the EU, NATO, and the petrodollar and join Russia. So I don't think Europe and Russia are going to go to war. Just the opposite. They're going to form their own trading bloc and make that happen. But you're back to a Kantian peace triangle.
So you don't see a way of America forcing them to go to war? The Europeans. You think
they need to, those every 4 years in November, we have a certain day where people go through a certain process. But if I say that word, the videos automatically.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, the ritual.
The ritual that we go through every 4 years in November. Oh, yes. My videos are being taken down on Energy Newsbeat. I've done dozens of videos on there, or at least 3 dozen. There's only 2 videos up.
Oh, wow.
All right. Yeah, yes, I got way more videos in limited state than Felix. So I can't say that word that is very consistent with a democracy. That process that occurs. I cannot say that word. Mm-hmm. But as long as the West more heavily influences that process, which is antithetical to democracy.
Right.
Anyway, they're gonna stop democracy to save it. Okay, so the more they heavily influence, they would have to massively influence that process, like they try to do with with what Mike Pence calls the dial-a riots, because you got the dial-a riots all over the place now. You know what I mean? Like in the Maidan Revolution was a dial-a riot, because they already got everybody's Facebook profiles, their LinkedIn profiles, Twitter, whatever, so they know how people vote. So they can send emails to their people and get them out to protest in conjunction with the NGOs that Brian Berletic always talks about, or Joaquin Flores. He talks about them too. He knows, he's been inside that process.
Oh, really?
I just kind of watch it from the outside, but he's watched it from the inside. So yeah, they're trying like crazy. Well, just watch the DW videos, because that's another Mockingbird.
No.
Okay.
Through and through.
They are just all the populist groups in the Danube River Valley. They're all far, I can't say the other word, but that they're calling them that 1930s ideology.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they're the villains of history. They must be for holding any sort of rational position that is not aligned with Washington. But I did want to touch on your point where just in the past year alone, we've seen the just overthrow of the results in Romania with Georgescu. The attempts to do the same in Georgia, which they failed at. The upstart opposition movement in Hungary with Peter Magyar. I know that in Austria they also tried to stymie the coalition. You go further west in France, they were a complete joke with the way the coalitions were formed. And we're also
ritual. The parliamentary ritual.
The parliamentary ritual. Excuse me. Don't worry. Yes. And now that we have a similar ritual coming up in Germany in about a month, we'll see what games are played there.
Right. So they're going to increase their pressure on the rituals.
Right.
Yeah. I don't want to see you get any strikes.
I appreciate it, certainly. We'll take care of it.
Yeah. So they're gonna these rituals that are occurring. Yeah, they lost the ritual in Georgia. Maya Sandu in Moldova she's been on thin ice.
Should I go to the election results that you had later in here?
Oh yeah. You can go down to those things. I just threw them in there.
I'll go ahead and pull those for reference. So do continue since I have Moldova right here.
Oh yeah. Because I'm too busy talking. I'm not. So yeah.
No, it's no problem at all.
I just threw those. I started throwing those maps up just as I was doing my research. I might as well throw them up there. So. Yeah, it's all the way down the Danube River Valley, and I've been talking about that since 2022 on Felix Rex Show. I've been talking about a lot of this stuff, definitely on Working Brother Show, because then I actually, on his show, I wanted to get my slide sets, the analytical frameworks, copyrighted in time and date stamp, and I wanted that in there because the propaganda of West is so vicious that just watching the Senate confirmation hearings today, people still think they don't know the sea power versus land power strategies. Mm-hmm. So the operationalization of those things is the power center strategies, heartland to coastal rimland, industrial power center strategies. That's how you operationalize those. They don't know those, so they still think that Russia just attacked Ukraine for no reason, or it's territorial expansion. And this is like crazy too, because Trump, you can tell, up until last week, he really thought that it was Russia territorial expansion. Russia was losing, or it's a stalemate, and then therefore Russia would be eager to come to a truce. And then just within this past week, he realized, it's probably through whatever, back channel negotiations are occurring, that no, Putin doesn't really want to talk at all. He will meet with Putin. Putin will meet with Trump, but only to save face. Because the longer Putin drags this out, and for that matter, because you mentioned Turkey before, and the whole Syrian thing was prearranged. Yeah. Putin, Erdogan, and Aliyev, the longer they drag this out, they can just watch the EU and NATO completely collapse.
I can hardly imagine it. But and I do understand though the rationale. But you know what I mean? It's all I've ever known.
I'm totally there with you. Well, yeah, but
Can it really be this?
Are we finally here?
Yeah.
Look at BASF and look at the Volkswagen Group, Stellantis Group. Look at their automobile sales. Volkswagen cannot lose money at this rate any longer. Because Volkswagen,
they can't.
You're talking about Porsche and Audi too.
Yeah.
All right. If Porsche wants to stay in business, they're just such a small scale custom automaker, it's really probably not that difficult. I mean, it's a big pain in the ass, but they can just move to Russia where the gas is.
That would
They don't have a lot of price elasticity, so that they could take a haircut and stay in business, but probably not BMW and Mercedes. But then again, we've been arguing this thing since 2022, before Nord Stream blew up. On my Telegram channel, BMW and Mercedes already have factories in Thailand and Malaysia. We already looked that up back then, so they'll just have to move more operations to India, Thailand, and Malaysia. That's what they'll do.
Now, didn't some of the German car companies move to America? I know BASF. Did they move to China or did they move to America? One of them moved to America, but several of them moved to China.
Yeah, well, BASF has factories in New Jersey, Texas, wherever there's natural gas. So, and wherever there's petrochemicals. So, yeah, BASF had a big because I'm from New Jersey and I go to Texas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have a big presence in New Jersey and Louisiana and Texas, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I would have to look up people can look it up. People could look that up on Google Maps. But yeah, they've moved everywhere. And yes, BMW has a factory in South Carolina. So they just transfer more of their operations over there.
And what you're predicting is, though, that some of these companies, maybe even the big German auto manufacturers, you think some of them might actually move to Russia if the war stops? Granted, some of these companies were already in Russia. They would only be moving back.
Correct.
Like Peugeot, for instance.
Oh, well, yes. Yeah, Peugeot, Citroën, all their sales are bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Renault. Yeah, all their sales are going down. Because, if you start taking energy away, the energy that's left in Europe, yes, the prices everywhere tend to skyrocket. Yeah, go up a slide. That you got the end there. If you go past that, there's more maps. But yeah, if the AFD comes to power, they rebuild Nord Stream. Okay, that's going to take a couple of years. To lay new pipe,
right?
But or to fix it, however they do that. I have no idea how they fix those pipes. But yeah, then Germany's got to, Germany's automobile industry is going to stay in power. But yeah, they're going to reopen their factories in Russia because you want to have, you want to cement your trade. Well, back to dime analysis. You want to increase your or I should say, the content peace triangle. You want to increase your interdependency.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to do that not just for diplomatic and economic reasons. Well, for economic reasons, you need to balance your trade out somehow. And then Russia's going to want, they're just not going to want to buy finished goods. They want to build their own workforce. They want to build their own economy. Right. But yeah, they're going to create the conditions under which Russia can alleviate its demand pull and its bottleneck problems just by buying bankrupted operating companies from Japan and Germany and wherever else. Okay.
Now, forgive me if I'm jumping the gun.
Too. KTM in Austria is also going out of business. They got to move to their Thailand factories.
Right.
Now, forgive me if I'm jumping the gun here.
Yeah.
But with this, under the potential economic integration between Russia and Europe, if this does come to fruition, if, say, any sabotage efforts from Washington fail and some semblance of this is allowed to happen, I would imagine at that point, focus would be shifted to the Asia-Pacific theater, and we'd see a doubling down there in terms of trying to dig in as just the next logical strategy for the American empire. Because if they have lost their stranglehold on Europe by and large speaking, just going with the scenario, then at that point they would need to increase pressure on another front. And I would imagine, looking at that, they would have to double down on their China policy in order to exert pressure there, in order to maintain some semblance of the world order that they've built.
Yeah, I mean, they're already. I mean, Brian Berletic covers that region of the world on his show, and yeah, they already are. I mean, I ride my motorcycle around and look at all the different competitions in Cambodia and Laos, and between the collective West and the different Asian countries. But it's one of those things where I kind of think I think it's good. I think it's going to be a snowball effect. Once it starts, it just keeps on going. Or domino theory. I called it last year. I called it the domino theory on Energy Newsbeat. The Russian natural gas and realignment series of papers and shows I did on his show. I think if it starts in Europe and goes right down the Danube River Valley, which is, look at the political maps I put up there. That's what the trend is. If that happens, I think it happens in Japan too. I think they go ahead and build that pipeline.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Shinzo Abe was trying to do, and he miraculously he came to a demise. Just like Fico wanted to buy Russian natural gas, and he survived his demise, though.
He did, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this is what I mean about, okay, you're seeing this trend develop, right? You could argue that America is preparing for this trend going further and further.
Oh,
and corralling Canada, Greenland, and most of Central America, especially Mexico, because Mexico looks like it's willing to play ball. Like what they're going to do is, if their dollar starts to become weaker and weaker, like their dollars are coming back, and the potential for an economic implosion, then what they have to do is to use the resources around them and their dollar within like a more closed system.
Yeah, and by the way,
does that make sense?
Yeah, go back up to map 6, by the way. Yeah, there you go. Okay. The grand strategic level is actually in the multinational corporations, big finance, basically, and big oil. That's not in the United States government. Go back to remember General Wesley Clark's 2007 campaign speeches. There's been a foreign policy coup. Nobody voted on this. 7 countries in 5 years.
Yeah,
the United States is already in Afghanistan, so it's actually 8 countries in 5 years. And I always make sure people know this in order because it's in geographical order. He names them in random. In geographical order, it's Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. So you're controlling the oil fields and the pipeline supply routes. So again, maritime choke points, riverine choke points, terrestrial land bridge choke points. He's taken over the oil fields and the land routes. The other 3 countries were Libya, Sudan. So you have the oil fields and the routes to the Mediterranean. Then Somalia is at the Gulf of Oman. I mean of Yemen rather, and you have the Strait of Bab el-Mandab there. So again, you're controlling the oil fields and the choke points. So people need to understand that it wasn't about bringing democracy to these places.
Yeah,
the reason why I keep on reiterating maritime, riverine, and terrestrial choke points. I want people to start thinking about it geostrategically,
right?
In terms of geography, because yes, they say it's democracy. The problem with that is Blinken wrote his book "Ally Against Ally," talking about Germany, and he published it in 1987.
Ally against ally.
It's about stopping the Germany from being dependent on Russian natural gas. So he wrote the book, and then on his departing speech, he's still acting like, well, we had to test whether Putin wanted territorial expansion. No, he wrote a book on getting Germany to stop buying Russian natural gas in 1987 when he was at Yale or Harvard, or one of those places. I can't really remember. But I got it because, yes, I'm such a conspiracy theorist. I'm reading Antony Blinken's own book. All right. And if you look at the Yale Grand Strategies course during the summer, their seminars, just look at all the names who attends that and the people that are speaking on it. Mm-hmm. You'll recognize most of the names.
Right.
So here, the reason why I want to bring that up is, yes, Trump is getting some advice about what to do, but he's not getting the whole full-blown grand strategy.
Right.
You got the people at the top telling him what to do, but not really giving him the full answer as to why to do it. So I love his Western Hemisphere strategy, love that, but no, he's completely misled on his European strategy, which some of the people I've been talking to off screen are like, they think that his foreign policy team is going to get fired in 6 months because, they're misled. They actually believe the war is a stalemate rather than Russia has the territory that they want. They'll want to push out to the Dnieper, but they just want to protect the Azov. They're not going to move too much farther. Just look at the 2014 election map and you'll see where the Russian Orthodox speakers are and where the Catholic Ukrainian speakers are. Yeah, I got that on a map somewhere. Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, actually, they could move, by looking at that map, they could move, and this is what scares them. I got to get people to focus on this. They could move all the way across the Dnieper into the Odessa Oblast and underneath Moldova. And the reason why that scares, the deep state so much is now you're down to the Danube River Valley. So if the other populist movements gain power, well, then Russia really has moved all the way to Berlin. Politically, infrastructurally, economically, diplomatically, but not militarily. But if the AFD is talking about, building the Bundeswehr, I think Austria always had Germany and Austria always had mandatory conscription. So does Switzerland. I think Germany stopped it. I'm not sure what Austria does. Do they still have at least 1 year? I'm not sure.
Austria still has it in a very informal sense. Germany stopped it after the Cold War. The French have been debating bringing it back.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Because I needed to double check that and I didn't. So Alice Vital is now talking about, she was sitting on the fence of working with EU and NATO a couple months ago. Oh no, within this past week, get rid of the EU and NATO and rebuild the Bundeswehr, back to mass conscription. Mandatory 2-year service. So yes, the Russian army doesn't need to go past the Odessa Oblast. Well, I guess they're in Transnistria because all the other countries are going to kick NATO out and rebuild their own military anyway. And if people start looking at the map that way, if this thing starts to unravel with the AFD, it could go all the way, to the Moldova Oblast border in Ukraine. And that's what they're terribly afraid of.
Yeah. German elections are in March, right?
February.
Wow. I guess we'll have to see.
So we're about a month out from that, and looking at the Ukraine situation, if the Russians can hypothetically secure, I suppose, what would historically been known as Novorossiya, at that point, Ukraine has no Black Sea access. You look at the concentration of resources in Ukraine, it's mostly in the east. That's why the Donbass has been so industrialized. And returning to the point of energy transit, at that point, Ukraine is a rump state. It's irrelevant, and it serves no purpose to NATO. And NATO, once again, if this plays out, loses much of its legitimacy. A lot of these Europeans may start to look at it and realize, well, there's really no point anymore. The Russians have shown themselves as a viable force, and they've also shown themselves as a country that has a lot to offer. And also, given its military success, it may behoove the Europeans to realize it's better to make a friend than an enemy here.
Yeah. Wait. Who did you say at the end there? I was adjusting my maps.
With the Europeans, if they do see, looking at the course in Ukraine, if the Russians, let's just say, achieve a maximalist victory, let's just say the scenario of the Novorossiya, this area here that Yanukovych may have won back in, say, 2014, 2010, 2014, whichever year this map is from, it may behoove the Europeans to look at the situation and realize Russia is a powerful country. It's proven itself militarily. It's proven itself economically. So they'd be much better to have as a friend than, say, an enemy.
Oh, absolutely. Well, especially if they need Russian natural gas. They're going to be friends. And okay, and now you're back to the Turk Stream thing. You know, it's probably the Ukrainians that are rumored to have been behind that. So yeah, they're trying to cut off the Danube River Valley from getting Russian natural gas through Turk Stream and through the Anatolia pipeline. So yeah, they would. I mean, this whole thing could very, very quickly unravel for the EU and NATO.
Right.
I mean, very quickly, and they're afraid of that. And yeah, if you go back up to the to the stoplight map I had up there with the levels of warfare, it's very, very important that people understand that the multinational corporations have the most MBA and PhD economic and analysts. They've got the most accountants. They've got a much, much bigger analyst corps than the intelligence communities, collectively, or in aggregate, I should say. Since I'm an Austrian school guy, I hate to use the word collective. I hate to use that word at all. So anyway, they know what they do, because a lot of them come from the Ivy League schools. They send a select few to the grand strategies classes at Yale during this, over the summer, the seminars.
Right.
So they're training a small fraction of a select few of their economic analysts or financial analysts in the grand strategies. They're just not telling everybody else they're proprietary. Mm. That's why those slide sets I go over, are proprietary. Not a lot of people have that. But then they're using that to control the branches of the military, the branches of federal law enforcement, the intel community, and like Department of Agriculture, the economic, Department of Interior, those type of civilian agencies as well. So over here on the institutional side, the grand strategic level, because we have civilian government, so no, that level does not exist. We don't live supposedly we don't live in a police state. So that the grand strategic level lies outside of government, actually, for a reason. I'm not saying it's good when it's good, it's bad when it's bad, like Aristotle's proper perverted form of government. But the institutional levels of government is both, not just the military, but people have to think they're also using the civilian institutions and the intel community. Plus, they're using the media and the NGOs. So that grand strategic levels by Wall Street, military industrial complex, and the petroleum industry, the big oil, they're telling Trump what to do, but not the full picture of why, which is why that Kellogg thing ended up. And I'm watching Fox News. I don't watch it on purpose, trust me. just when I'm flipping through the channels, and every time I see Trump is going to deal with Putin from a position of strength, I'm like, if he does nothing, the populists take over the whole Danube River Valley. And then, yeah, technically he's got all of Europe without moving past Odessa Oblast.
Yeah.
Now, one question I wanted to float to both of you, because it's constantly in my mind, I brought this up constantly towards the beginning of the war, is the question of Poland. How much of a thorn in the side of this plan do you think they can be? I mean, I think they could be, but realistically, I don't think it's going to pan out.
No, it's not going to pan out because, you know, that process that we go through periodically in a democracy, it's those, you know, those process, their parliamentary processes are very heavily influenced, but they are trying to, they're kind of in panic mode too. If you watch some of their videos, because they're calling a whole bunch of their populist movements, you know, that 1930s world of
yes,
yes, the villains of history,
the mid-century villains of history.
Yeah. Okay, it really.
Of all history, forever and ever.
Not to say the wrong words. You know?
Yes, no, I understand.
It really, and then I got other complications on top of that, so I really got to be careful how I say and how I phrase everything.
Well, I mean, I see two paths for Poland. Like, if we see Trump essentially, you know, washing his hands clean of the Ukraine war, okay. This will all depend on whether, like as you say, there's a war-shaping bombardment of Iran that will ensue very quickly after, or not. But if the polls,
the window on that's closed.
You think it's closed?
The window on that's closed because Trump apparently said no to Jake Sullivan. And Israel
I get that. I get that sense too. I agree with you, and I think also the fact that Netanyahu wanted to talk with Trump, and it looks like, you know, this Gaza deal does not include a war with Iran, is about all you need to know. But let's say that stays the course, and Trump is going to wind down the amount of money, because there will be money that will still be going into Ukraine. But let's say as the money dissipates, Ukraine's ability to defend itself will also dissipate, and Russian gains will increase with more rapidity. If that's the case, then, you know, there's only going to be like there'll be a period where all this talk about sending in peacekeepers, you know, the British, the French, they keep talking about this over and over again. That's the point where I see Poland trying to do something about it. If nothing happens after that, I think Poland will fully understand the situation and try to create dialogue with the Russians. I think if there's not, like, if there's a kind of a rapid collapse that happens in Ukraine after the effects of lack of money, let's say in the next 6 months, then and no peacekeepers are brought in. Of course, that could happen. But if no peacekeepers are brought in, Poland will go into negotiations at that point with the Russians. They will look for a deal.
Yeah, I basically agree with that with some nuance, though. I mean,
Curious. I would love to hear your nuance.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's Germany's going to rebuild Nord Stream and then sell it all the way up and down the Danube River Valley. Well, then you still have Estonia. Well, you have the Baltic states and Poland and whatever rump state you have in Ukraine paying exorbitant fees for energy, you know, be it natural gas, oil, or electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, their economies are not going to recover under those conditions.
Right. I mean, they opened the Norway pipeline just a few weeks after the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline.
Oh no, the same day.
The same day. You're right. Day. Oh, you have a good memory.
Yeah. We
You
were
do?
wargaming on my old Telegram channel that day, pretty intensely at that time.
Wow. Yeah. So on the same day that new pipeline from Norway to Poland opens up, right now, it's not enough to supply. It can't do what Nord Stream did, but in a way, okay. If Ukraine's a lost cause and Europe isn't willing to engage in a war with Russia, in a way, I guess what I'm suggesting is Poland has the gas. That gives them a certain sense of
Autonomy,
economy and stability, and a stronger position to give their pitch, as it were, to the Russians. So it might, in the end, it might work out well for them. It might.
Oh no,
Hmm?
that it won't work out too bad for them.
Yes,
but then the economic development will occur all around them, not in them.
I know what you mean, especially with the whole question of the riverine economy with the Danube.
The German auto parts makers were putting plants in Poland. So if Poland goes that way, then they shift those jobs someplace else.
Right.
Trading blocks don't want to deal with other trading blocks. That's why they form. They form for some kind of they form to stabilize and give themselves more political, geopolitical strength,
right,
and stability. So then, why would they? Let's just call it the Danube River trading block. If
right.
they do that, you wouldn't really want to bring Poland in after everything that they've done, and unless they throw out their Western-backed government, which I can tell from watching some of those Mockingbird videos. Oh yeah, they're totally afraid of that.
Yes,
they're absolutely totally afraid of that. But if the Western governments stay in there, that's going to be a really awkward situation because Russia wants to grow economically.
Yep.
Putin's whole thesis was on, ELG ISI. His whole thesis was on export-led growth, import substitution industrialization program. So that was what I'm paraphrasing it and just that just those development strategies. That's what his dissertation was on.
Interesting.
It's not on territorial expansion. They don't need any more territory. They just need the land bridges. What the West is trying to take away is what he needs. He doesn't need it for territorial expansion for his military. He needs it for his pipelines. And that's what the whole Russian natural gas. Let me play this video clip real quick.
Russia, home to the
turn it up.
World's biggest natural gas reserves. The gas is needed, especially in Europe. And the end of the Cold War ushered in an era of conflicting energy dependencies and concern in the West.
You're giving the Soviet Union hard currency, and they're using that to build up their military, and this is going to come back to haunt us.
Meanwhile, the 1980s marked the beginning.
That's all people need to hear. I encourage people to watch that video. Wait, now you're getting now.
Yeah, there's an echo.
I urge you to watch that video all the way through because it's all full of logical coherence. If you understand my power plant strategy, they do mental gymnastics to justify cutting Russia. Separating Germany from Russia. They do mental gymnastics.
Yes.
Because in one of those videos they talk about it's not Russian natural gas they're trying to stop. It's Putin. It's the person. He's evil.
Right.
The problem with that is in the videos they in another video they talk about how they've been trying to stop this since the Kennedy administration. Well, how old was Putin during the Kennedy administration?
Yeah,
Was he still in diapers?
he was.
I mean, this is, you start to see the logical incoherence of these videos, and yes, it is 100% about Russian natural gas, and it's all about the 5 power centers strategy. And Mark Goodwin, I think was his name, Ambassador Goodman. I may have his first name wrong. He's talking about, there's a school of thought that said the more economically integrated you are, the more militarily integrated you are. Well, yeah, I mean, I call it PAMISI dime analysis.
Yeah.
That's why I keep on throwing the diamond analysis out there. Because, yes, they full well know the more you're infrastructurally integrated, economically integrated, diplomatically integrated, then you become militarily integrated. The United States is totally following Mackinder-Spikeman theory and trying to stop, and trying to maintain Europe as an ally. Lord Ismay was always saying the purpose of NATO, keep U.S. in Europe, keep Germany down in Europe, and keep Russia out of Europe. Well, the pipelines do the opposite.
Yeah.
They put Russia and Germany together, and they push NATO out and the United States out, or the sea power out, if you want to put it in sea power versus land power terms. So it does the opposite. And yeah, just to, we got to wind it up. How long have we been going on?
Just
2
shy
hours.
of 2 hours.
Yeah, George, I was going to say, for people who don't know, because some of our listeners, they're young, or maybe they're just new to the topic, but pipelines emanating from Soviet Russia to Germany began like in the late 60s. Like, people shouldn't think like there were this video by DW is, it's almost implying like the Soviet Union fell and then pipelines were built. No, Germany
Even
already
Thatcher
had
tried
Germany
to make
already had
pipeline
2
deals.
different pipelines, of which one of them was the Druzhba.
Right.
It's so ridiculous. Like, 2 different pipelines were built going into the heartland of Europe during the Soviet era. The thing is back then, the Europeans could say no to America. Even a country as psyops as Germany could still say no.
Right. We covered that. I covered that on some of the other videos, especially with Working Brother and Felix Rix, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, just to throw it out there for the listeners, if you're not familiar with the geostrategic theories, fastest way to learn it is watch Mr. Sin's channel. He's got a short 20-minute video on Mackinder. He's got a short 20-minute video on Spikeman. So that's the Mr. Sin YouTube channel. And then go to the Strategy Stuff channel on YouTube and binge watch that. If you have that as a background, it makes it a lot easier, to listen to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm integrating economic theories and geostrategic theories. So yeah, my stuff is 700 level.
Yep.
And that's, 700 levels is the fastest way for me to talk to other analysts, other graduate school people. If you're not there yet and you want to get there, which I highly recommend you should. Yeah, start off with Mr. Sin, watch the strategy stuff videos, then watch, I like Real Life Lore is a really good Mockingbird channel. They keep on throwing these statements every other sentence of, and Russia attacked for no reason. So if you tune that out and just listen to the information that they provides, he does a great video on Russia's catastrophic energy problem, Germany's catastrophic energy problem, and China's catastrophic energy problem. If you tune out the 5% where he makes these ridiculous statements, those 3 videos are really good. And they're highly explanatory. Just tune out the 5% of propaganda I guess
Right.
he throws it in there to make sure that he stays on the air.
Yes.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
A
But
little
it is
discernment goes a
annoying.
long way with a lot of those videos, where if you just ignore the fluff and focus on the substance, you actually can get a lot out of them. You just got to be vigilant about that. And even real life lore, one of the ones he did, which the title amused me a little, is Why We Were Wrong About Russia's Economy Collapsing, where it was about a year and a half after the war. They were looking at in retrospect and explaining Russia's economic success since the beginning of the SMO. And he went through and, to his credit, or to his handler's credit, or whoever we're talking about, mistakes were admitted and oversights were admitted in terms of analysis.
Oh, there's the I think is it the Joe Boggs channel on YouTube? It's this British guy. Oh my God.
Yeah,
This
I think
guy-
I know who you mean.
This guy, I don't know how he has any followers. He's been predicting the collapse of Russia any minute now. And then Milu comes into power in Argentina and he's talking about how their economy is collapsing. And I'm looking in the comments section and people from Argentina are like, oh no, things are getting much better. These changes are really needed. But there's people like that have tens of thousands of followers, and me, I'm just getting my videos pulled down. You know,
Wow.
I mean, it's so, you know, the cards are so stacked against me. And you're like, okay, well, you know, I only had a small channel and I got rid of it because I didn't want to get in trouble at work. But, you know, now I've been on with Stuart Turley on all the time, and he's got a big Spotify channel. I get 20 or 30,000 views per video on Spotify, apparently. So when I'm on a different platform, yeah, I get views. On YouTube, Working Brother or Energy Newsbeat, I probably get 50 full views, you know, maximum. You know, a couple hundred short, you know, partial views. But on Spotify, he says, or on his website, people are watching my videos, you know, over a couple of times, and they're downloading the transcripts, and they're going over the transcripts for hours because he's watching people go through his page. But on YouTube, it's the opposite. So yeah, you really get to see who the mockingbirds are. So no, I don't blame real life lore for repeatedly saying that, because otherwise he would just be, you know, blocked and limited state like I am.
I've said many times, I'm grateful for the small audience we have. I think it creates much more of the environment I like to work in. But yes, I think there's a reason that we're only at 1,600 versus, say, some larger operations. And once again, I kind of like it that way. I like having the smaller circle. But once again, I think you can see that, yes, some people are obviously promoted, some things are suppressed. And when you look at different platforms, it's a whole different story. And I do want to remind everyone that I do have the Rumble channel. I'm going to get that updated. I'm going to get that backlog put there just in case anything happens, or if out of principle we prefer to watch it there. So I'll just take the opportunity to put it out there then. But I suppose with all of this, we should talk a little bit about the Middle East and this draft peace plan with Israel.
All right,
Sure.
go ahead. Yeah.
So just some of the brief points I did see on this, I'll just pull them up here. And keep in mind, this is all tentative. No pen has been put to paper. No action has been taken. But this was from one of the many Mockingbird accounts, as you have said. And this is particularly on Twitter from an account at academic_LA, saying, and I quote, Israel has capitulated on several factors, allowing for a deal to be reached. Israel has agreed to withdraw fully from Gaza, leave no troops in the security zone. That includes a full withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor. It has agreed to allow Hamas to rule Gaza. That is also not an agreement, but there is no mechanism to remove Hamas. Israel has agreed not to exile released prisoners, but rather let them into Gaza again. Israel has waived its demand to list a list of live hostages is agreed to allow residents to return to North Gaza with only symbolic security measures. Israel agreed to accept the deceased bodies in the first stage. And he goes on and he complains about the particulars of that. But once again, it does look like if even only some of these points come through, we're looking at major concessions from Israel. And I did want to tie this back into the recent issues between Trump and Netanyahu, or what people expect are issues between Trump and Netanyahu. And I will remind everyone, go back to 2018, go back to the first time, or actually, excuse me, the second time the U.S. launched strikes on Syria. When Trump refused to turn it into a sustained campaign, there was a pretty heavy falling out between him and Netanyahu, where Netanyahu would actually increase strikes on Syria in the following weeks and months. So they certainly have had a clash of personalities before. They certainly have butted heads before. That's not to say that Trump isn't pro-Israel, because he most certainly is. But with this, I do think what we have happening now is, number one, Trump wants to take a peace deal home. I do generally believe that, no, the man does not want a war. But he also, of course, wants to look like he's coming from a position of strength. So he wants to be able to bring a peace deal home, ideally within the first 100 days in either Israel or Ukraine, ideally both. And that as part of that, of course, Netanyahu is never going to relent with that. So what I'm thinking so far, this is still I suppose you could say, theory in development. Trump, in conjunction with, say, some internal Israeli faction, let's just say for the sake of convenience, somebody like Naftali Bennett, Netanyahu's immediate successor back in 2021, are working together in order to have a transfer of power in Israel, so some tentative peace agreement, even if it does eventually fall through, can be achieved. So Trump can bring that home, he can look at it, and he can say, we put out one fire from the past 4 years, let's work on the rest of them. In which case, it once again increases legitimacy both at home and abroad. It takes one vector of pressure off America, especially as we see the situation turn more and more volatile around the world, whether that be in Europe, whether that be in the Asia Pacific, whether that be in other parts of the Middle East. So I am thinking, moving forward into this, that we could possibly see a situation where a tentative peace deal in Israel is agreed to, with the stipulation that Netanyahu and his coalition fall from power and are replaced. Say, let's just say Israel holds another ritual in, I don't know, the next 18 months, just to put a rough estimate out there.
Yeah.
I'm thinking there's a real possibility. And like I said, I don't think this is going to be maybe what some of the maximalists, some of the people who have, let's just say, a very sour feeling towards Israel might want. But it does look like they might be able to brute force out at least some temporary return to the status quo pre-October 7th, 2023. In which case, like I said, it does look like, at least what I'm looking at, I might be reading too much into it, the pieces on the chessboard, so to speak, are aligning where they're going to throw Netanyahu under the bus and hammer out some sort of tentative ceasefire, tentative peace agreement.
Yeah. Of course, I do expect that, because Trump, he campaigned on peace, but boy, Gaza's destroyed.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to do about that. I mean, do you rebuild it or whatever?
Over 46,000 dead. That's the latest estimate.
Yeah, at least. It's just, I'm just really puzzled what they plan to do about that. Also, it looks like, things are going to probably become less stable in Syria. The other thing is, Turkey's got their pan-Turkic movement that they want to incorporate in Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan.
Yep.
I want to do a show on, I think, what the neocons were trying to do with the Syria thing is ride the back of Turkey and actually try to destabilize Iran and help them realize their East Turkestan movement. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Also, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if you know, you did lose camera feed, and we're just seeing a black screen.
Yeah, why did that happen?
I'm not sure. I still have the presentation up and everything, but okay, so you turned your camera off, so you can leave it on, keep it on, turn it off. It doesn't really matter. We can still hear that. Okay, you're good now. You're good now.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I noticed that. I thought something you did on your end. Okay. I just turned it off and back on.
Look at this. Look at what China's been reduced to in this map. Who did this map?
Oh. No, yeah, that was a really good thing. I was going to do this. Well, I'm going to do this.
No, I mean, I'm not trying to belittle it. I understand, like, the whole thing about Turkic people. Like, they literally go from Siberia, the Yakut, the Sakha. They're like, they dress like Native Americans, with the leather, the suede, the feathers. Honestly, they dress just like them, but they speak a Turkic language. They are thousands of kilometers away from, like, I don't know, Turkey or Uzbekistan. But so these are a far-flung people. They're in many areas. I'm just I spoke about this on the last show about how as you said on this show, there's the ideal model, and then there is the strategic model with competitors, and how there is a zero-sum gain in that model. So the U.S. NATO might feel like, you know what, maybe it wouldn't be the first time that the West supported the Turks against Russia.
Right. Okay. So yeah, you go back to Kennan's 5 power center strategy that John Lewis Gaddis talked about in his book, Systems on Grand Strategy. I actually meant to grab a different book. Oh, here it is. I got it over here. This is his 1982 book or something like that, where he talks about the 5 power center strategy.
Wow.
Then, of course,
yes, the Grand Chessboard.
15 years later, you got the Brzezinski and the Grand Chessboard. I just want to throw those books up there so people can see it and just go over this as a thought exercise, because it was always, Speakman's idea to work the rimland, and especially Kennan, to try to try to break apart the Soviet Union. Now it's Russia. The YouTube channel Unheard,
yes,
has a really, I think I even have that listed on that video listed somewhere on this slide set. They have a really good show on a couple of years ago on how to break apart Russia. So that's a really good show for people to go through a mental thought exercise. And so is this one, because the idea was to break apart Russia, then help the Turks take over Central Asia and make it East Turkestan. So that's the whole reason of trying to move into Afghanistan and try to destabilize Iran. Because then you have going back to General Clark's 7 countries in 5 years, Lebanon rather, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. But the point was to help Turkey realize this whole area and cut off Russia and China by taking the former Soviet Southern republics.
Yes.
That's been the plan since Zbigniew Brzezinski's Operation Cyclone. And that's another thing that everybody needs to look up. Look it up on Wikipedia. Look it up. Watch the Zbigniew Brzezinski videos, his interviews on YouTube. Because this is actually strategy. This stuff's actually written up.
Right. No, I believe you.
Yeah, people need to understand this. Sometimes if you talk about plans, that's not going to happen. No, but the very fact that they write books on this, people need to know. Because they need to know they were going to cut Russia off, collapse it, split it up into the oblasts, take Afghanistan, disintegrate Iran, and help Turkey take this whole area. The plan was to, yes, take the former Soviet, Russian or Soviet republics, the CIS or EEU countries now, the Eurasian Economic Union, and also take back, the Xinjiang province or East Turkestan, and take back Tibet too. Mm-hmm. So this was a far-reaching plan, and they were using General Zia al-Haq from 77 to 87 to make that happen. So this is an ongoing strategy, and people need to be aware of it.
Yes, yeah. These strategies are perennial. They can span centuries. They never go away.
Yeah. So it's just we kind of need to do a show on that.
I'd love to. I'd love to, because there's an irony about the Uyghurs.
Well, I got the slide segment right here. We can, anytime you guys want to do it.
Yeah. We'll do another show, and focusing in on Central Asia, the whole Turkic thing, I think would be fascinating. I just wanted to say that with the Uyghurs or whatever, that in the early medieval era, basically they were very compliant with the Chinese. They worked with them, and other Turkic groups that wanted to, I don't know, subjugate China or carve more territory for themselves at the expense of China. The Gok Turks offered them twice to join them, and the Uyghurs didn't. And now, ironically, almost 1,000 years later, they want to go head to head with Turkey, especially after their efforts in Syria. But yeah, I would love to. Let's do that on the next show.
Yeah,
talk about the whole pan-Turkic, the spirit of Turan, supported by the U.S. and NATO.
Yeah, I like this map, because it's got the Azeri enclaves just south of the Caspian.
Yep.
And you actually at the 5 o'clock position on the south of the Caspian, there's actually a little Kurdish area in there too.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the land bridge that they wanted to get the pipelines to go underneath the Caspian. So if you look at, like, this is, for my purposes, this is a super good map. And people don't know anything about Central Asia. Okay, I got to go over there and live or work in Afghanistan and visit Kyrgyzstan. I wanted to do more traveling in the area, but some things fell through. But people really need to understand what these strategies are. And yes, that, the collaboration between the Arab fundamentalists, Zbigniew Brzezinski, and Britain with General Zia al-Haq in Pakistan was to take over this entire area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't doubt it.
Yeah, people need to understand that history.
There was a pipeline, and I brought this up on the last show, that originated from Uzbekistan. It was supposed to go across the Caspian Sea, toward Azerbaijan and Turkey.
Pipeline, you mean?
But it was the. It started with a B,
Turkey,
I think.
Baku.
Yes, and so they built about 30 kilometers, and then it just fell through.
Well, Russia stopped it. Russia stopped it for environmental reasons.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You have
I see.
The Caspian Sea conventions are, to do anything on the Caspian, you need unanimous decision between the countries.
Right.
So
okay.
Russia blocked it, and in the UN, it makes a difference. Do you call it a lake or an inland sea? if it's an inland sea, you can do it. But if you call it a lake, you can't do it. So there, people in some petroleum workers were explaining that to me when I was in Baku several years back.
Okay.
But for economic reasons, Russia doesn't want it because they're trying to keep, they want to be able to sell their product to Western Europe. But now that they can't sell their product to Western Europe, and clearly Syria was prearranged, so now what's the back end of the deal? Because when you talk about this area of the world, what's the back end of the deal that we don't know about between Putin, Aliyev, and Erdogan? So that's what that discussion needs to be about. Because there is no show talking about that.
Right.
I haven't heard anyone. I'm the only one. I've been talking about it on Energy Newsbeat. But I'm the only one that's actually lived and worked in that area. So, for years and years.
Right. Very interesting.
Yeah. All right. I think we did 3 hours, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we did definitely over 2. So, and it's 11 o'clock where I am.
Yeah, same. We're just over 2 hours. So.
Yeah, I was having my narcissistic personality disorder discussion before this. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Oh.
We had 30 minutes of that.
Well, I was telling GSP off air, it's not really a show if you don't spend half an hour in pre-show conversation.
That's true.
Yeah, that's where we get to catch up.
Yes, but it's true.
Yeah. So let's do that again because
I'd love to.
Slide set. I got these sections done. I got the maps up.
Okay.
Maybe I'll add something
good.
to them because we talked about. We got the general idea across on this anyway.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I'd love to expand on Central Asia because that's obviously going to be, as you say, probably the next area of conflict, and it's underneath everybody's radar. Yeah, it was the Nabucco pipeline, 2011 to 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I got those pipeline maps in that slide set somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, I've got some too.
I'll definitely hold on to this. Yeah, because people don't know anything about this, and they don't know what the grand strategies are for all of Eurasia. That's why it's a grand strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes sense why they would like to develop this area and why America went into Afghanistan, because it's like the central place that keeps Russia, Iran, and China away from each other. Like, just look at the geography, right?
Well, maybe we'll go back. Maybe we'll start this. I'm not sure. I've been working on other slide sets and other stuff.
Yeah.
I've just kept on adding to this slide set, so now I don't know what my previous sections were. But I know I have Peter Hopkirk's great game books in there, his Central Asia books.
Okay. Well, I'll take a look at it because you gave me the PDF. Yeah.
Okay. So look at that because I'm pretty sure I got those books in that slide set.
Okay.
So we could go from Peter Hopkirk's great games in Central Asia books and then get into this just to show people this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, people need to know that history because, this Ukraine was, the Ukraine war was planned decades in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And
just read the Open Society Foundation documents from 1993. It was all right there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, right. There's a bunch of those little things where, Fiona Hill's been writing about the pipelines going from Georgia straight to Bulgaria, since 2003.
Mm-hmm.
No, Putin did not just wake up one day and decide to attack Ukraine.
Yes.
I mean, he said no for 20 years. Well, okay, from at least 2014, then it got really bad, right? But this is the United States. Well, my other slide sets that are proprietary, the name of the first section is the Eurasian Natural Gas. Wait, GWAT and the Eurasian natural gas wars, because that's all GWAT is. Anyway, we'll end it there, I guess. I can talk forever on this.
Well, thank you,
Sounds
everyone,
good,
once
George.
again for tuning into another episode of the War Report. And thank you, George, once again for coming back. We're very eager to have you back on.
Appreciate it.
And there's so much to cover, so little time. But for now, we'll cut it here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into another episode of the War Report. Starting the year off strong, and we'll see you guys next time, and goodbye.
Goodbye and take care.